I view him as a little brother.
So you literally grew up with somebody like you grew up with them in the family.
It's showtime.
It's kind of interesting to have done the voice of something that is actually a bigger star than you are.
Yeah, I just want to say I as a massive fan of the Child's Play franchise dating back to, I think the first one I saw was the third one.
Oh, wow.
This movie was incredible. And we tweeted out a couple days ago our initial reaction to the film, and found it to be very endearing and really wholesome. So yeah, just thank you for that as a Child's Play fan.
That's cool, because I like didn't get to grow up with it. Like, I did grow up with it, but like I didn't get to go see it in a theater because I was born like too late in the game. So that's cool to hear.
Yeah, definitely. So I know that you previously did the short film, The Dollhouse, taking a look at kind of what it was like to grow up in this franchise, so to speak. What made you want to tell this story as a full-length feature?
I just had so much footage at the end of that short film because I crazily interviewed, I think there were 7 of us in the short film. And so it was basically like an hour per interview. So I had 7 hours whittled down into 7 minutes. And even just those interviews, I thought this could easily be an hour in its own right. And then when the reactions from Chucky fans or horror fans was really positive to the short film and its festival circuit, I realized like, oh, okay, this is something people would actually be interested in. And that's when I started thinking about expanding it.
Yeah, I can see that, because I remember the short film from like 2013, was it, or 2017?
2017, yes.
2017, yeah, sorry. Yeah, so it was great to kind of see it expanded like this. So yeah, I had a question kind of from the documentary side of things. You make that very interesting decision in the kind of final act to turn inward and kind of reveal who you are and how kind of this personal connection. And up until that point, if you didn't know that, it's just a Child's Play documentary, and then suddenly it becomes this very endearing, wholesome experience. Why do you think it was important for you as a filmmaker to tell this story, and what went into that decision to kind of turn inward and focus on, I guess, turn the focus onto you?
Yeah, it's I think my documentary professor in film school hated that decision that I made. She adamantly was against filmmakers involving themselves in the film, but it made it more personal. As we watched like reference films for that semester of film school, the one that spoke to me the most was this documentary called Stories We Tell, and it's like the filmmaker's journey to finding out about her family and things like that. And it was done really beautifully and well. And it was the most interesting documentary I had seen at the time. So I knew I wanted something to be personal. So that aspect kind of was always lingering, regardless of the short or the feature. I definitely wanted to focus on that at some point. And then there was a big debate on like, when does that come into the conversation and the film and things like that. And I tried some options where I was, from the beginning saying that I was this person doing this thing, but there just like wasn't enough footage of me interviewing people and it to be kind of that, we just didn't shoot it that way entirely originally. And then, my dad didn't work on the first several films. So then when I decided that I also wanted it to be a retrospect, there's like, 4 whole movies and 40 minutes later that I'm just like neither myself or my dad are a part of. So it felt a little bit odd to like start this conversation that we don't talk about again for another hour. So I figured Fiona delivered a perfect segue into breaking the third act, where she was like, "Your dad," and he's like right there on the floor.
Yeah.
So
And the camera pans over. Yeah. No, I really enjoyed that aspect of things. And yeah, I think that played into how endearing it is. I can imagine Child's Play fans now watching the movies kind of differently, knowing that kind of personal connection. Not just that. I was curious, there's other personal pieces in it, and kind of wholesome pieces like Fiona and Don Mancini saying, kind of talking about their friendship. I'm wondering, in kind of making this movie, if there was a particular kind of fact or revelation or behind the scenes trivia that really stood out to you as interesting, kind of stuck with you?
Yeah, because a lot of these conversations I was having with people for the very first time. So I was hoping that there would be parallels to my own life, but you never know what somebody's personal story is. So hearing Brad and Fiona's relationship and how so much of just like the two of them seemed like my dad and myself was really not a revelation, but just very, very interesting and kind of validating in a weird sense of, Fiona and I both are born in October. Our dads are both Chucky in their own regard. And Chucky was always at her birthday parties. He was always at my birthday parties. It was just really cool to see that this experience I had as a kid was that I thought other people couldn't relate to. There are multiple people who can surrounding the franchise, which is like the whole gist of the film. But it was really weird being in the room and interviewing and hearing answers and being like, oh, this is very more similar than I thought. This is wonderful. And realizing how close some of the people within the franchise themselves are to each other, like Fiona and Dawn and things like that. And Christine and Alex are so cute in their friendship as well.
Yeah, no, I love that element that you add in the film. And yeah, it's really interesting that, in interviewing, you saw this kind of resonation with you. Yeah, so I in general, I really enjoy behind the scenes looks at horror films, and we cover some of those on our site, not just films, but books. Could you see yourself directing another documentary about a horror franchise? And if you had the chance, what franchise would you pick?
That's an interesting question. Well, because Freddie and Jason, they already have theirs.
Yeah.
And then although there are many franchises today, they just don't hit the same way in terms of like the cult classiciness of it, because the 80s movies are so different. So I don't know, but I was thinking this early, is there one on Saw?
I don't think I'm not familiar with that. No.
If there is, I haven't heard of one, but that would be more of like, because Jigsaw is also like a horror icon that came in later, which is so cool that it was able to come in like the early 2000s and become a part of the cult slashers. But yeah, that'd be interesting, because that first Saw, I haven't seen all of the Saw movies, but I am a James Wan fan, and that first movie is like everybody remembers that.
Oh, that first movie is excellent. The twist and everything. Yeah. Well, I would definitely watch that. Yeah. I would definitely watch that. Kind of similarly, I guess a natural question after directing a documentary like this is, does maybe having your hand at a Child's Play movie or even an episode of the television show, is that of interest at all to you?
Absolutely. I would love to direct an episode of the TV show. I know it's Dawn's baby, and there are things that come with, filming in Canada. I'm not Canadian. I also have not. There's like, when you're in film, it's such a double-edged sword, because people are like, well, we want to hire you to direct this episode of something, but you haven't directed an episode of something. And I'm like, right, one of you has to give me the opportunity to. I can't do it until one of you gives in. So that would be so cool, and such a full circle moment to like direct this iconic doll that has been with me from the beginning. And I obviously know a lot that goes into how it works and why and things like that, but I would love to direct an episode one day. That would be really cool.
Yeah, that would be really neat, and kind of a full circle moment there. Yeah, I wanted to point out, so I really, in the documentary, I really enjoyed your transitions, kind of progressing successively from one scene to the next. And as a fan of physical media, that was really neat. I wanted to ask you specifically about that structure of the film. You structure the film as kind of going through each successive film until, as we spoke about, you turn inward. What made you want to structure the film like that, and what gave you the idea to make those transitions so cool?
Yeah. Well, when I was piecing together the more familial aspects of the documentary, it was less impactful, so to speak, without speaking about the history of the movies first. And so when that came into play on the editing room floor, I knew it needed to be just a one-stop shop for Chucky and be retrospective as well. And there's no better place to start than the very beginning. You kind of have to. And then from there, it's just like, it makes sense to go chronologically through the movies. And when that happened, I was like, okay, I need something visually to tell us where we're at. And the VHS idea actually came from, I was obsessed with watching the Ted Bundy tapes on Netflix.
Okay. Yeah.
Their title sequence is very good on that show. And there's obviously a lot involving tape recorders. And my parents had not thrown away their VHS player, thank God, at this point. So I just went and recorded it in my parents' basement over COVID and ordered some of I had all the DVDs, but I didn't have the VHSs. So I ordered that. And that helped tell the story of how much time has also passed too, which I really liked about that. As far as like the doll being built, I just had, I had access to that. And that's a lot of things that audience members never get to see, is like, not is there so much involved in just like the puppeteer work and the animatronics, but there's so much that goes into just making a doll, like from his mold making to the sweater to the overalls. It's all done by hand. And I don't think enough people behind the scenes get credit for that. So it was really special to me to like work with the people who I've grown up with as well, who are behind the scenes doing their jobs.
I am Chucky, the killer doll, and I dig